extensive remarks today. We're happy to have both our chancellor and our provost with us, and you'll no doubt want to hear from them and maybe ask them some questions. So that's a priority for sure. I do want to remind everyone that nominations are still open for the chair of the faculty position. And to remember that faculty governance is only as strong as those that participate in it. If you are nominated, please take that nomination seriously. Someone thought of you and took the time to put in a nomination. They believe that you could be an effective voice and representative, and that's truly an honor. So don't let the opportunity pass you by because you feel too busy at the moment that the call comes in. There are ways to make this work. Of course, many people are quite cynical about the ability to make a difference through faculty governance. But having done this job for entering my third year, when you commit yourself to it, I don't believe that that's true. You can make a positive difference for your fellow faculty members in the ways that you listen to their concerns, the ways you represent them, and the ways that you speak out on behalf of shared governance and the needs of faculty. As I look around this room and on the Zoom, I see so many good-hearted, fascinating colleagues and wise colleagues that I never would have gotten to know if I hadn't said yes when the call came to me. So please put yourself or a colleague forward. We never know who we will need to meet a particular moment. But if Kenya McNeil-Trice and her committee do not have a variety of choices, then you definitely won't have what you need. So please keep that in mind and think about that. Our agenda is full, so let's get to it. And I appreciate you all being here both in person and in the hybrid space. As always, the hybrid world presents some challenges. And so bear with us as those challenges arise. What I have just learned is that the live stream is not working. It is working now. Okay, terrific. But I think we are going to back up record just in case. So if there were to be some problem with the live stream, we would have a recording available for folks, as we always do. Okay, so let me turn it over to the chancellor at this point.
Thanks, Mimi. Can you hear me okay? I think I have a lavalier.
Okay.
You can hear me okay? And assuming this is a good place to stand so that the Zoom folks can see too, but it's great to be back with everyone. It's hard to believe we are in week 8. We're finishing week 8 of the semester, of this fall semester. It seems like just yesterday we were starting, and we're standing there out at over at the Smith Center welcoming at convocation our new students and telling them that it would go fast, that before you know it, they would be out on Kenan Stadium, for their commencement. That 4 years goes fast here, so enjoy it. But halfway through this first semester, and things are going really well on campus. I want to just take an opportunity. I just learned a few minutes ago that it is Mimi Chapman, the chair of our faculty's birthday today. So a round of applause and happy birthday, Mimi. So thanks for your leadership and all that you do.
Thank you.
Good. So it's an honor to begin today by presenting the annual Philip and Ruth Hedelman Prizes for Artistic and Scholarly Achievement. The late Philip Hedelman, class of 21 at Carolina, and his wife Ruth established the award in 1986 to recognize outstanding junior faculty here at Carolina. This year's winners exemplify groundbreaking and innovative research, along with a promise for a great future for these individuals here at Carolina. We're proud to have them as fellow faculty members here at Carolina, and I want to recognize them now. And 2 of these individuals, I understand, are not here with us either in person or on Zoom, but I want to acknowledge them and offer up a round of applause. The first of those is Seth A. Berkowitz, Associate Professor of Medicine. Round of applause for Seth. I want to be sure that Seth is not here. That's what I was told. He was not able to be here today. Not on Zoom either. Okay. Congratulations, Seth. Danielle Christman, Assistant Professor of English and Comparative Literature. And I believe that I think that Danielle is not here either, but a round of applause for Danielle Christman. With us today is Dr. Frank Liebfarth, Associate Professor in Chemistry, and please stand, Frank, to be recognized. Frank, as you know, was our commencement speaker last December. Round of applause. And did an incredible job in inspiring our graduates, about 550 graduates, as they left the Smith Center off to their on their journey. But thanks for all you do, and thank you for being here with us today. And finally, Yulia Pailaeva Gupta, Associate Professor in Genetics, and I believe that Yulia is with us on Zoom. Yulia, thank you for being with us, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to these fantastic faculty colleagues. And I just want to take note that the Heddleman Talks will be held on Monday, October 10th from 10 to 12 in the morning in the Pleasance Assembly Room at Wilson Library. And so I hope that many of you can join us for those presentations. And again, how about one more round of applause for our 4 recipients today? So I have so much that I could talk about. As I said, we're just finishing up week 8 of the semester. So much happening on our campus. But I thought I'd start today by just highlighting and talking a bit about the incredible speakers that we attract to our campus every day, that we bring to our campus to speak before our faculty, staff, and students. Most probably importantly, our students, to bring these incredible scholars and leaders before us. Just last week, for those of you who were able to join us over at Keenan Flagler for the groundbreaking ceremony for the new building, we welcomed to campus Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He's been in that role leading JP Morgan since 2005. Some have called him the most powerful banker in the world. And to have Jamie Dimon here was amazing for a fireside chat with one of our MBA students. But he talked about leading during turbulent times. Can't imagine what that's like. Talked about advancing racial equity and the importance of sustainability initiatives in leading a major company and serving as a CEO. But he was very inspiring. It was great to have him here. Later that day, we had from FedEx, we had the founder and CEO of FedEx, Fred Smith. He was here and he spoke at the 15-year anniversary of our FedEx Global Education Center. And this building has become a game changer for us here on our campus. We talk about becoming a leading global public research university. And it's the emphasis on global that really became part of our mission probably 15, 20 years ago, and that building was a game changer for us. It's a partnership with our campus, especially with the work of faculty members. And I always have to mention Jim Peacock, who most of you know Jim Peacock, and his devotion and dedication to seeing that building come to life 15 years ago. But it's provided the resources for us that really guarantee students will receive a global education here at Carolina. But Fred Smith was here for a fireside chat in the evening with Vice Provost for Global Affairs, Barbara Stevenson. And he talked about being bold and building a company for the modern world and what that was like back in the early 70s when FedEx was founded in 1971. And it was just great to see Fred Smith there with our students over at the Mandela Room at the FedEx Global Education Center. On Wednesday of this week, we celebrated Latinx Heritage Month by hearing from Olympic gymnast and gold medalist Lori Hernandez. It was fun. I was sitting in the front row with my wife and daughter and a friend of Tessa's who they are both gymnasts, to sit there and listen to this inspiring speech by Lori Hernandez. And as she talked about some of her challenges with mental health and trying to compete at such a high level at such a young age, and what that's meant for her life. And she's now an inspirational speaker as she goes across the country. But to have her here to help us celebrate Latinx Heritage Month was really fantastic on Wednesday. And then last night, Provost and I attended the Wolf Lecture, Thomas Wolf Lecture, where the award-winning author, Percival Everett, did a reading on his new award-winning book, The Trees, which is on lynching in the U.S. and a chronology of this and put to a fictional piece called The Trees, which we have told has been up for several awards. And it was an inspiring evening to hear him read. And he spent several hours over the past few days with students on our campus and celebrating the incredible work of our creative writing program in the Department of English Comparative Literature. So this is just a sample of some of the incredible innovators, thinkers, and entrepreneurs who come to our campus each semester. And it just happened that we had several of them here during a relatively short window over the past week. Second, I want to give you a quick update on the Women's Center, because I know that some of you have been asking about it, and I think you deserve to have an update on where we are. Mimi and I have talked about this on a few occasions, and I think it came up perhaps at FEC earlier this week. But as many of you know, Gloria Thomas, who led that center, did an incredible job leading the center for several years, had left to become the president of HERS, which is the Higher Education Resource Services. It's a leadership development and research organization dedicated to creating and sustaining a diverse workforce for women in higher education. And Gloria has been leading that organization now for about a year. And so when she left, we conducted a national search for the next director, but unfortunately that search failed. And so in meeting with several campus leaders and spending some time with Joseph Jordan on this, we decided to take a step back and to reimagine, what might a new and innovative women's center look like at Carolina. And I want to be clear that we are committed to moving the Women's Center forward. And before launching a renewed search for a new director, we wanted to do a meaningful assessment of its mission, its vision, its services, staffing, and even perhaps its name, as we have learned that there are other centers around the country that have even created a different sort of new identity for the work that's conducted through these leading women's centers on campuses across the country. So to that end, I've asked Beth Posner, a professor in our School of Law, to lead a comprehensive process to re-envision the center's purpose and scope. And so in the next several months, many of you will probably be hearing from Beth. She's meeting with groups on campus and the community who have an interest in the Women's Center. And if you have ideas and or know of colleagues around the country where their centers seem to be working exceptionally well, would like to hear your input on this. And she's getting input again from stakeholders on the needs of the future of our Women's Center. And so at any rate, and she'll be doing a lot of benchmarking work on this. In the meantime, just know that Joseph Jordan remains deeply committed to this. This falls under his portfolio in the Provost's office, and is working to develop some programming over the next several months, while Beth and her team, working closely with Christy Hurt, my chief of staff, who brings a lot of expertise and experience in this space, will be working on this comprehensive review. And so I just felt like you needed an update on where we are with this. Third, I know that you've read the news and then have heard about the concerns on campus around lead in water in a number of our buildings on campus. And we're in the middle of testing all the buildings across campus based on the age of the buildings, and that does include residence halls. We've been asked about whether or not this includes residence halls. And although the testing is only recommended by the CDC for high risk into categories or individuals, so pregnant and breastfeeding individuals and those with pre-existing conditions, we are making testing available for anyone who works, studies, or lives in the affected buildings. And I'm going to stop at that, because I think I know we're going to have a presentation on this here shortly, where we'll provide a more in-depth sort of update on where we are. But I want you to know that we're taking this very seriously. And there's work being done on this every day to try to make sure that we get to the right place. There's nothing more important than the health and safety of community members on this campus. And I want to thank Kathy Brennan and Rebecca Fry for bringing their expertise to this, and we'll hear from them a little later. Fourth, I just want to, since we won't be back together again before October 31st, and that is the date that our Students for Fair Admissions case will be heard before the Supreme Court, and we will defend our admissions process, our holistic admissions process before the Supreme Court. And due to pending litigation, I'm not able to comment directly on all of the legal arguments that will be made on the 31st or for future outcomes. I just want you to know that we are continuing to defend that holistic admissions process, which is race conscious. It is one of several factors in our holistic admissions process. And, what I can tell you is that we will, the diversity, I think there's no one in this room that would argue that this is important. It's who we are. It's part of our DNA, the way in which having a diverse student body, it brings to life the curriculum at Carolina. I recently did an interview on this and talked about it's even bigger than that. It's about protecting our democracy, which is under attack, as you know. It's about preparing the next generation of leaders to be able to participate in a democracy that is inclusive of all voices and opinions and different lived experiences. And that's what I will continue the point I'll continue to make as we defend our holistic admissions process, and diversity in all dimensions on this campus will be essential in educating that next generation of leaders that I know that we are all committed to. So we have to be prepared for any outcome. And so we will carefully review the decision, which we probably, while it'll be heard on the 31st of October, we're being told we likely will not know the outcome of the case until late spring, early summer. And but we will be continuing to keep you updated as we learn more. And but I firmly believe that we have a very strong and important case to make on behalf of not just our campus, but for hundreds of colleges and universities across the country. Finally, I hope that we'll see you on October the 12th next week for University Day. We'll celebrate our 229th birthday in Memorial Hall, and we'll be recognizing Carolina's research and the impact that our researchers have had not only on the state of North Carolina, but the nation and the world. We will feature 2 or 3 research projects that are being led by our world-class faculty alongside undergraduates who are working with faculty in their research laboratories. And I think it'll be a nice way to showcase the way in which we prepare that rising generation, the next generation of leaders who will go on to solve the grand challenges, not only of our time, but of the future. And then a week later, on the 19th of October, we will launch the Tar Heel Bus Tour 2022. We will head out across the state of North Carolina, about 100 faculty and staff, hitting 21 stops across 21 counties and nearly 1,000 miles traveled on 2 buses. And I hope that anybody in the room here today, either on Zoom or in the room, will be on the bus tour. Okay. We've got a few folks who will be great. How many went on the Tar Heel Bus Tour 2019? I know, okay, several of you did. Well, it's going to be a great day for our campus as we touch down in these communities and towns that our students call home, to showcase the important work of our faculty and the impact that we have in our commitment to being the university of the people, as I like to say. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Provost Clemens for some updates, and then we'll take questions at the end. Good. Absolutely.
Well, I only wore the tie, so
There's another one.
He said he only wore the tie so he could wear the lavalier mic, is what he said. I'll use the mic for questions.
It's gonna be a total waste otherwise. All right, can you hear me? Good. I don't have time to get the wire right. I thought we have a lectern. I'm just going to hold these. I don't have the fancy cards. What's going on? Hi. No, I'm good. I can hold it. It's a great day to be outside, so I'm going to go quickly so you can all get there. And I'm imagining on Zoom that all of you have fake backgrounds, and when they dissolve, we're going to see the beach, your yard, or something behind you. It is the season for events. As Kevin mentioned, I want to thank the English department for inviting me to the Wolf Prize, the Thomas Wolfe Prize dinner, which you didn't get to go to, and for letting me sit across from author Percival Everett. The dinner Wednesday and the reading last night were extraordinary. In between, I attended the Program for Public Discourse Abbey Speaker Series and heard a lively debate on intellectual diversity at the university, moderated by our own historian, William Sturkey. These events provide, for me, moments of pure intellectual joy, partly at not being in South Building, but partly also because of the intellectual ferment they create. And they showcase our faculty, and I never cease to be amazed by all that our faculty do and their talents. So it's a great time of year to be able to get out for those. At my first meeting with you 8 months ago, I mentioned a principle that we will serve our students and our state best when outstanding faculty are empowered to shape the direction of the university. Mimi has encouraged you to put your name in or accept nominations to join us in this. Since that time, I recruited several faculty leaders to help as assistant, associate, and vice provost in my office, and I've elevated the roles of others, and we introduced them to you last month. The idea here is to make faculty leadership roles more available and more accessible in my office, and to expand faculty governance, which can't just be legislative, but should come from faculty leaders positioned to make change throughout the institution and to amplify the efforts of this council. In the provost's office, we're in a continuous learning process about how to embody the ideals of inclusivity, transparency, and accountability you expect from us by focusing the office on the core functions of the chief academic officer. And I'm excited to tell you some of the progress we've been making on several fronts. We received initial funding from the legislature for the School of Data Science and Society, and the inaugural dean, Stan Ahalt, Jay Acat, and their team are making progress jointly with the college on the development of new curricula that will be submitted for approval to the relevant committees of the Faculty Council in the next months. The plans for the school include the launch next fall of an online program in collaboration with our partner 2U, and a formal announcement of that is coming soon. We're working now with the Vice Chancellor for Research, Penny Gordon-Larson, Associate Vice Chancellors Andy Johns and Craig Fletcher, along with the college and the health affairs schools, to program space in a new building for campus called the Translational Research Building. This building is going to provide needed expansion space for research in infectious diseases, virology, neuroscience, and other areas. You will be hearing more about this as well in the spring semester. Following up on the work of this council, we had the first meeting of the Salary Equity Committee that this body called for by resolution and the chancellor established earlier this year. We're beginning the work by reviewing some updated guidance from the Department of Labor, OFCCP, that's the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. And we've engaged some outside experts to review all of the methodology that we're going to employ to make sure it meets federal standards and guidelines and the standards of our industry. So this part is going to take time, but if we do this work up front, then we'll know that we're using the right methodologies that are established by convention, by law, and by best practices. More importantly, I think we want to make sure that the infrastructure is there for this to be a sustainable effort and not a one-time approach. So I've asked the Assistant Provost for Finance, Baron Matherly, to see if we can add resources to our own salary equity team, which is led by Assistant Provost for Institutional Research and Assessment, Lynn Williford. I will provide updates to this council as we make progress on the initiative, because it's a crucial part of faculty recruitment, a crucial part of retention, but more importantly, it's a demonstration of our values of equity, justice, and solidarity, one of my favorite words. Concur. I'm getting ahead of you. You were going to ask. Concur. There's supposed to be like a boo or a hiss. In response to the very frank and unsolicited input from the faculty, and after discussions with the deans, whose input was solicited again, our Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations, Nate Knuffman, has worked through some changes that will make Concur work better for us. Deans will be able to opt in to an alternative process with Concur that will give more latitude on how travel is booked, meaning You will be able to exit concur in the booking of travel, provided you keep some documentation about your fare, and re-enter when it's time for the reimbursement. So the alternative process will not require the provided travel agency. Yeah, well, thank the Chancellor. The Chancellor has moved this forward, I will say, with determination. There will be some other changes as well. There'll be more training. One that I really like, international per diems. Having gone on an international trip and being paid the state per diem, they don't always work out so well. So that turned out to be I thought that was some new rule, but it's just a choice and they're unchoosing it. So I think you're going to like what's coming, but wait for the memo. They're preparing campus guidance and they're trying to get in place some of the pieces for the training. We'll include a call center. So I think you're going to see things get better. So you were heard. Chancellor made it happen. I watched it. I think it's going to be okay. So a few more things. Each year, the Cohane Visiting Professorship brings prominent faculty to serve as visiting professors at UNC and Duke for a one-year period. During this year, they deliver a lecture series and engage students and faculty around areas that are shared between us and the university down the road. This year, Pawan Dhingra will serve as the Cohane Distinguished Visiting Professor. Pawan is a leading scholar of Asian American culture and history at Amherst College, where he serves as Associate Provost and Associate Dean of the Faculty, as well as a Distinguished Professor of U.S. Immigration Studies. So I think I'll be inviting Pawan to come help in my office while he's here too. I'd like to invite you all to Dhingra's lecture on October 27th. It'll be a public lecture at the Carolina Inn in which he will discuss ways to combat anti-Asian violence. And please encourage your students to attend as well. Last thing, I look forward to seeing you all at University Day. Wear your regalia if you can. It's not required, but we should wear it. The weather is going to be a comfortable 73 degrees. I look forward to seeing you there, and I will take questions. I'll even switch to glasses that I can see you with.
So real quick,
We have a question.
I just want to say one thing, because this classroom is incredible. This is the first time we've met in here, I believe, as a faculty council, and we dedicated this about 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, because Cameron, weren't you here? Was Cameron here? And which I'm going to introduce Cameron here in a second, but this was dedicated 2 weeks ago. It's the Knight Foundation Learning Lab, and it's amazing what you can do with an old classroom. This was, if you remember, an old grungy auditorium that was a general purpose classroom, and our goal is to build out many more classrooms like this. And I want to say that our Board of Trustees is committed to this. If you watched our last, or you attended our last Board of Trustees meeting, we talked about that being a top priority over the next 2 to 3 years, is to reimagine the infrastructure and to do a lot more of this. Our secretary, Jill Moore, said when I came in here and said, "Isn't this amazing?" She said, "I think I took Econ 101 in this classroom." That was just a couple of years ago, I think. Just a couple of years ago, but it is an amazing place. But I do want to take this opportunity. I'm going to ask Cameron Farwell to please stand and be recognized. Our new Vice Chancellor for Communications. She is finishing her second week. Cameron, thank you for joining us from the University of Missouri. And I know she's got to bring a wealth of experience and expertise to this critically important role. So a round of applause and a welcome. Thanks, Cameron. Sorry about that. Jan.
Oh, it's a mic. Very nice.
Look at that. Where do you get a microphone like that? I don't think they had those back when you were taking Econ 101, Jill.
I think the idea is that you can throw.
You could throw it right across the room.
So I just have a clarifying question about the travel. What about the provost clearance of international travel? Is that still around, or is that being?
Oh, the provost clearance for international travel. Great question. So that came about because we're under a travel ban, right, from the system office. And the only way around the ban is for the provost to say, yes, you can go, even though it's banned on this trip. I have explicitly told the deans that I am delegating to them And if they wish to, I will subdelegate to chairs the approval of all international travel for faculty to tier 1 and 2 countries, which is almost 90-something% of our travel. So it no longer has to come up to my desk. It'll all be approved much closer to you. In the Concur system, it's been integrated, but it should be faster because it doesn't have to come up that high. There are still level 3 and 4 countries where it may come to me or it may be handled by my designee. So that will get faster too. For students, things have not changed so much. Right now, we're only allowing student travel internationally if it's part of an approved study abroad program. We're not approving undergraduate student travel under other circumstances based on guidance and from the system office. It's my hope that as the pandemic moves into its whatever it is, I don't want to say concluding stages because we were all getting boosters in South Building this week, that we will eventually have the ban lifted, and then we'll go back to a standard process, which still requires a supervisor approval for international travel. And in some cases, if it's on a grant, it may require using US flag carriers and other approvals. So I hope we're migrating back to a normal-like situation. Is that good? You can toss it to me if you want.
Well, hearing none, we'll thank you.
I have one more question. A while ago, we were talking about graduate student stipends. What is known on that front? Is there going to be any increase in the minimal graduate student stipend?
Yeah, well, here's what's known on that front. What's known is Theo Nollert and his leadership team in the graduate student professional government are awesome. They brought us all kinds of data that shows where we sit. Based on that data on our own convictions, the question now is not whether there will be a stipend increase, but rather how much and how broad. The way we've done it in the past has not always been the best, where people at the minimum get money from the center, everyone else has to fend for themselves. We're looking carefully at that because it kind of incentivizes folks to stay at the minimum. That might not be so good. And we're trying to find a budget, of course, to do the largest that we could do at this time. But it's safe to say it's not going to be zero.
We are working really hard to make sure that there is an increase. And I've spoke with Chris and I have spoken to Jim White, the dean in the college. That's where we hit most of the challenges exist in several departments in the college. So we're committed to this, as we were last year. Misha.
Toss it back to Misha.
I have a question about the Data Science and Society school. So you mentioned that there's funding to start offering courses through the online through 2U. Is that right?
So the MADS program, the Master of Data Science online, Master of Arts in Data Science online, will be done in partnership with 2U. And in our contract, they give some money up front to develop it. And they've delivered that money. And we're looking at new people to help do the curriculum. And then it'll be launched online in the fall.
And so is the outlook that it will ultimately be fully online, or will there be in-person components to?
Yeah, so the
Data
plan
science?
right now, and it's, it's a little bit in flux depending on how long it takes to develop the undergraduate curriculum, is to launch this online master's first. And part of that is because we had the money from an outside source, and part of that is because it's quicker and it generates revenue. Next year in the fall. The following fall, we would launch undergraduate programs joint with the college and with other schools. So a BS in the school, a BA that might be shared amongst several schools. So that's 24. And then in 25, start to build the residential master's and PhD programs. So the residential master's and PhD programs are integral to the plan, but in some ways they're the most expensive and difficult things because you need a critical mass of faculty to start admitting graduate students. Mm-hmm. And so you're spending at a pretty high rate at that point. And so that's further in on the ramp. But yes, there will be residential masters and PhDs. And it will be a research strong department. So we're going to bring new world-class talent in data science to supervise those programs and grad students.
Thank you.
I just want to take a moment because Anna Wu came in, and I'd like you to stand, please. Because we were talking about this incredible new, state-of-the-art classroom that we're in right now. And Anna and her team did a great job of making this possible. And Anna and our team, but Anna's our Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities and Design. But I promised them that we're going to see dozens of these types of classrooms showing up on our campus. So we have several others, but this one's pretty special. But a round of applause and a thank you, Anna, for you and your team. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you both. Yep. All right, let's see. Next up, we want to introduce our new Chief of Police, Brian James. And Brian, please join us. I was invited last year to be in on interviews with the various candidates and really was delighted to meet Brian at that time and so glad you've decided to join us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to be on the agenda this afternoon. Just want to start out by telling you a little bit about myself. I've met a few people in the room, but originally from Greensboro. I was born and raised there, primarily by a single mom. Had an opportunity to go to North Carolina A&T. I was really the first person in my family to go to college. And shortly after that, I really decided I wanted to do something around public service and went into law enforcement. So I was started out with the sheriff's office there and went to the Greensboro Police Department and eventually ended up becoming the chief of police. So what I'll say is life is funny. I remember coming here on a couple of field trips when I was growing up. And one time I was in elementary school. The next time I think I was in junior high. And I remember being up by the old well and seeing Brad Doherty walk by. I'd never seen a 7-foot tall person before. And I never could have imagined at that time that I would one day be the chief of police here at UNC. So I am incredibly proud to be here and feel incredibly blessed for this opportunity. I've been here just over 3 months and I've learned a lot in 3 months and I still have a lot to learn. But what I will say is that we have some great people within the police department, but we still have a lot of room to grow. My philosophy around policing, and first of all, is that you cannot do a good job in law enforcement and police work, keeping people safe, if you don't have great relationships. And we certainly need to build in that department. It's been a last couple of rough years, certainly in the world, in this country, and around law enforcement. And we certainly want to go out and try to build those relationships and make sure that we're doing the right things and that we're listening to the people that we serve. As we look at some of the things we're doing, we have some great forward-reaching or outreaching programs with our community services unit. Most recently, a project that was actually led by emergency management, we assisted the zombie preparedness event. We had police officers out serving snow cones, which might sound very, simple, but those snow cones on a hot day actually created some great opportunities for some really good conversations and the building of relationships, especially with our students on that day. We even had a zombie police officer. Fortunately, he recovered from that and he's back on duty, but he did a great job and it was really hot that day and he stayed in character the whole day. And simple things like that are just very important because what I always say is that you cannot build a relationship in the middle of a crisis. You simply can't. And just an example, we were talking about a lot of safety issues. And when we talk about, for instance, if we had an emergency and we needed to evacuate a building, hopefully you've developed the trust in me and our department that if a police officer comes in and says, hey, we really need you to evacuate this building, please follow those instructions. If you trust me, you're more likely to follow those instructions immediately and give us an opportunity to explain later. If you haven't had positive interaction with us or you don't trust the police department, certainly you're going to have a lot of questions. And that relationship, again, plays into safety. But most importantly, what I want us to be is a part of this campus community. I don't want us to be an occupying force or the folks that work out of the building over on Manning Drive. I want us to be a part of this community. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of help from you as well as the students on campus and faculty and all staff. So we really need to work on that part. As far as people, law enforcement has been challenged in the last few years as far as hiring and recruiting people and also retaining people. We have a few vacancies in the department now. We are managing that. But what I will say is that I look at it as a glass half full situation. We have an opportunity to restaff our department with new people. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to increase diversity as far as demographic and also diversity of thought. I haven't thought of all the great ideas that are yet to come. So we need new people that will come in and bring those ideas. And we also need to make sure that we're listening to our campus and also making sure that we're listening to our officers. As I've done one-on-ones, we've got some very young officers that have some wonderful ideas. And certainly we want to listen to them and create the environment where they feel like they can come and talk to me or anyone in the leadership team and make those ideas known so we can possibly implement those, because they are the ones that are out here each day, that are answering the calls, that are interacting with you and the students. And they really have their finger on the pulse of the university. So we really need to look at that. Also, training. Part of my background is very heavy in training. I want to make sure that we have the best trained officers here. That's in communication as well as tactics around things that we have to do to make sure that we are safe in the event of a crisis. And hopefully we can be, as I told my department this, I said that, we are the flagship university at UNC. I want to make sure we have a flagship police department. So hopefully we want people to come here asking us, hey, how did you do that? Why are you able to do this so well? I want to be that department, and we will get there. And when I look at goals, I will say this, they're very simple. My goals are around making sure we have the best relationships and making sure we have the safest campus in this country, not in the state, not in the Southeast, in the country. And that will be our goal each year, to make sure that we have the safest campus. Safe campuses not only include numbers, we look at our stats and things like that, but also safety is perception. Do you feel safe on campus? Because if you don't feel safe, then one could make a case that it's not a safe campus. And feeling safe oftentimes requires communication. It requires our presence. It requires trust in the department, as well as the staff and faculty that work here. So we want to make sure we have those relationships from top to bottom, making sure that we're always doing the right things, making sure that we're listening, and also making sure that we're transparent. And as we do these things, we want to hold ourselves accountable, but we also want you to hold us accountable and ensure that if there is an issue, that you can address it with us and that we can confront that issue head on, and we figure out how to fix it as quick as possible. But again, I feel very fortunate to be here, coming out of municipal policing for a majority of my career. All but 3 months of my career is municipal policing, the 3 months that I've been here. But certainly there are some differences in campus policing, but there are some similarities. And I've also looked at, some of the ideas that I've implemented previously in my career certainly are relevant here in a campus community. And I'll look at some of those things, but certainly open to new ideas. And all of those ideas will not come from the police department. They will come from the community that we serve. And that's the way it should be. So with that, I think did I have 15 minutes or so? Am I ahead of schedule? Okay. Okay, I'd be glad to take any questions. Yes, sir. Yeah, faculty and students. He said, what do we need from faculty and students to be successful? What I would say is this, is that as we engage in outward programs, whether it's educational programs, whether it's doing something in the pit just to spark conversations. I mean, it could be the snow cones again or a safety event. We just ask for your participation. And what I would say is talk to us, give us a chance. We are people. We certainly know a lot about our field, but we're not flawless. And we certainly need that feedback and that interaction in order to know what it is that you would like to see, or let us know what we're not doing so well. Because a lot of times those doors of communication are not open. And my attitude is this: I would rather know what it is that we're not doing well so that we can address it. And that certainly takes a level of maturity in the profession, but also a great relationship. And hopefully we can get there. Yes, sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Miguel Lacerna, Department of History. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to ask you mentioned trust, and I'm sure you're familiar with the recent and long history of policing on this campus and some of the issues that have happened between students, faculty, and the police. And there have been, moments of real deep rupture. There have been moments of students, activists being infiltrated by police. There have been cases of our students who are activists who are being harassed by members outside of the campus community and turning to the police and feeling that they've been not heard or not protected. And so, I'm very grateful that you're saying this, because I think this is the right note to be hitting. But I'm wondering, what are you planning on doing to mend that kind of feeling of distrust that is among a lot of the members of our community? Of course, not all, but some feel like that trust has been ruptured, and what can you do to rebuild that?
Well, what I'll say is that we have to rebuild it. I simply can't do it, and it's going to take some time. Looking at some of the things that have happened on campus and law enforcement in general, we have to look at what went wrong. Over my career, when I've looked at the things that have gone wrong in law enforcement, it almost always starts with communication, because there was a lack of communication. And I said something earlier about not being able to form a relationship in the middle of a crisis. And some of the events and some of the things that you're probably referring to, it seems like there may have been a void in communication from the beginning. And I don't want to Monday morning quarterback anyone, because I certainly, there's some things or decisions I've been involved in and I wish I could have done over, but certainly we learn from those and we try to move forward. It has to be a bridge. And what I would say is that as we want to have a good relationship with the campus community, I hope that the campus community wants to have a good relationship with us, because again, and I'll say this again, we want to be a part of the community, not someone that just works here or just does this specific job. We want you as faculty, as well as our students, to look at us as a part of this campus, and that we're all working towards the same mission. So it certainly has to be a two-way street. And I think it has to start with conversations just like this. And certainly if you have any ideas, I'd love to talk to you offline. And if you could help us facilitate that, we would certainly appreciate it. Yes, sir.
This is Eric Muller on Zoom. I have a question, if it's appropriate now. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I will try to say.
We can hear you, Eric.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, Chief, first of all, welcome. Wish you all the success in the world on the new position. There was a major story in the national media over the last couple of weeks about the use of artificial intelligence to monitor students, especially, and their social media activities as a part of as one element of policing strategy. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your views about the appropriateness of using those sorts of techniques. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. So specifically talking about the information that was put out about Social Sentinel, what I know about that program is that we certainly did possess the technology. We're about to end that contract, but some of the information that was put out about it wasn't necessarily, I'm just going to say accurate, because when it started talking about things referencing looking at people's emails and things like that, that certainly was not the case, at least for UNC-PD. When we look at the use of social media, looking at things like, for instance, if you put in keywords to look for, which certainly you can put in any search engine, a lot of the things that it talked about that this service did, one could sit down at a computer and search Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or any of those platforms and put in keywords to try to find any information or any phrases out there that may be a threat to campus. Specifically talking about looking at students' email, it was not specifically looking at any particular group of emails, but looking at email, not emails, but social media posts that actually posted information that we were looking for. So for instance, if it said keywords like anything threatening, like bomb or gun or anything like that with a combination of words, then certainly it might pick up on a phrase that had been posted on social media. But that information actually could be researched by any of us that has a smartphone or a computer. What I would say is this, is that in law enforcement, we certainly have to have the ability to gather data to detect any threats to campus. As far as looking at the morality of using certain platforms, I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think if you're using it to inhibit anyone's free speech, that is certainly wrong. But if we're looking for key phrases that might be a threat to campus, we certainly want to know about that in advance and we have to address it. So what I'll say is that from our perspective, that particular service had not been used, and from what I can tell, having only been here 3 months, had not been used in a number of years. And because of that, as we looked at it and reviewed it, the contract is almost up and we're going to end that contract at the end of October. And we are not currently using that service for any of our law enforcement activities on campus. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Next, we are discussing lead, and we have a number of folks here to join us. We have Executive Director Kathy Brennan from Environment, Health, and Safety, Professor Rebecca Fry. Are all of these folks with us? I know we have Vice Chancellor Anna Wu and Director Daryl Jeter of Emergency Management. I'm not sure that Daryl's here. Oh, he's on Zoom. Okay. All right. Wonderful. So can I turn it over to you? Who's taking the mic?
Yes, this is Daryl Jeter.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. Can I make a quick request?
Before we get started, if you're in the room and you're signed into the Zoom, will you disconnect your computer audio? Because I'm not sure why we're getting echo, but that could be part of the reason.
Likewise, if you are in faculty council and you are sitting up in the nether regions, please join us down here. Okay. You want me to pin him? Oh, I thought he was. I guess into the. Okay. Okay, we're turning it over to you, Daryl, if you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity. We are certainly appreciative of your interest in the topic, understanding of it. And what I would like to do is just speak in a high-level overview to give you all a sense of our efforts and our approach with addressing the response to lead. We're basically approaching this based off of the executive priorities that have been clearly established and articulated to us those being focused on the testing, both conducting the water sample testing in the buildings and also providing the health lead testing for students, faculty, and staff. And then the other priority, of course, is in the area of transparency, ensuring that timely, regular communications to our campus community and leadership is provided throughout this process. And so what that translates into with our approach to the response is this is a multifunctional coordination effort. While institutional integrity and risk management is leading this coordination, we are relying on a number of our campus partners to assist us with this so that we can address it in the most expeditious manner, understanding the level of priority that it raises. I also want to note while is leading the coordination, we're also partnering with the Chancellor's Office. And so operational excellence is providing support with strategic alignment just to ensure that our operational objectives remain aligned with the executive priorities. And so we're very appreciative to them. This is an aggressive approach, and so we are approaching it from a limitless mindset as it relates to what options we can employ to ensure that we achieve our objectives while keeping the safety of our students, faculty, and staff as that top priority and in mind with respect to our approach. So I will have 13 or so core departments that are actively involved in the coordination. We are tapping into, again, every available internal and external resource. I will highlight, in addition to the Chancellor's Office, and operational excellence, we do want to really recognize the efforts of Environment, Health, and Safety, Campus Health Services, facility services partners, and also from the faculty side, Rebecca Fry and Kathleen Gray. You'll be hearing from Rebecca momentarily, but to be able to tap into those experts' information and knowledge to help inform our approach to the response, we're greatly appreciative of that. And then finally, on the operational focus side, again, with the health of our students, faculty, and staff as our top priority and number one objective, our focus is with respect to the water testing. We're taking a phased approach, prioritizing those buildings and fixtures with the highest likelihood of containing lead first. And that also includes the residence halls. Kathy Brennan will speak a little bit more about that phased approach during her presentation. Secondly, the blood testing. And so as you've heard before, the university is making available health testing for lead to all UNC-Chapel Hill faculty, staff, and students who work, study, or live in an affected building. And that is regardless of their risk category. And so we just want to make sure, again, that information is emphasized and understood. Also, our third prong with our operational focus is understanding that as we're going and conducting the testing in the various buildings, we also want to ensure that alternate drinking water sources for the buildings with fountains that are offline are made available during that testing period. And then fourth and finally, as I alluded to earlier, the communications and updates. And so we're working with university communications just to explore and make sure that we're using a variety of tools and outlets to ensure our campus community can stay apprised of what our efforts are throughout this process. With that, I'm going to invite Kathy Brennan from EHS to talk a little bit more about the drinking water update.
Great, thank you, Daryl. I have some slides I'm gonna post here. Well, thank you for inviting us to give an update on the campus drinking water. Again, my name is Kathy Brennan. I'm the Executive Director at Environment, Health, and Safety, which is part of Institutional Integrity and Risk Management, otherwise known as as Daryl mentioned. So I do want to just start with kind of how lead gets in drinking water. And the most common sources of lead in drinking water are going to be lead pipes, faucets, and plumbing fixtures. And typically these are either lead service pipes, faucets and plumbing fixtures that may contain some component of lead, like lead solder, that maybe they're lead lined, or they have pipe fittings that contain lead. This is not uncommon, and they were used for quite some time many years ago. So lead can enter our drinking water when these lead containing materials corrode over time, and it's really dependent on a lot of factors, whether or not how old the things are, how corrosive the water is, how hot the water is. It's very dependent on a variety of factors. OWASA, who is our public water authority here in Orange County, does add corrosion inhibitors to our municipal water, and that does help aid in preventing this from happening, and that they are required to do that by the EPA. Additionally, I do want to highlight that OWASA has done a survey of their service lines, and they have no known lead service pipes in their service area. So that survey has occurred, and that is a good thing, that we do not have lead service pipes. I also want to talk a little bit about the EPA action level for lead. So this action level of 15 parts per billion is actually specifically for public water systems like OWASA, is not related to universities or colleges, but we are using that EPA action level just as a reference point when we are doing our testing. So you might have seen some of that in our communications. I do want to highlight that although we're using this as a reference point, we do not want to see any detectable lead in our drinking water fixture results. So if we do detect lead in any fixture, we do place that out of service immediately, and we are going to replace it. So even if it's below that 15 parts per billion, it's going to be placed out of service and the fixture is going to be replaced. Daryl mentioned that we are using a phased approach to the water testing, just to kind of go over what that means. So we were alerted originally, we were alerted there was a potential issue in Wilson Library, and we performed comprehensive testing in that building. We did find 4 out of 20 water fountains had detectable lead, but the results from that testing indicated that it really was a localized issue related to specific fixtures. So we decided to develop a proactive and aggressive sampling plan, and that was based on something called the 3 T's guidance from the EPA, which a lot of K through 12 schools utilize. So this phased approach, phase 1 was looking at drinking water fixtures that potentially contain lead components based on their age and construction, which is kind of what we saw in Wilson Library. And we've completed phase 1, and phase 2 is what we are currently in. So we've now moved on to drinking water fixtures and buildings that were built in or prior to 1930. And then phase 3 will be buildings built between 1931 and 1990. And these dates, again, we're following EPA guidance. These are dates that they recommend for high priority testing. So again, I mentioned phase 1 is completed. Those were the drinking water fixtures that potentially contain lead components based on their age and construction. We were able to utilize the facility services database for drinking water fountains and fixtures to actually target specific fixtures. So from this survey that we did, we went out and tested specific fountains, and we did find additional fixtures in 10 different buildings. Again, we tag these fixtures out, sign them, and they will be replaced. So in these buildings, if maybe we found one fountain in a building, once we find that one fountain that has detectable lead, we went back and surveyed the whole building just to test everything, that all the fixtures in the building. We have gotten some of these results back, but we are waiting for some buildings. We're still waiting for results. So phase 2, which is what we're currently in, again, it's the drinking water fixtures prior to 1930. In buildings prior to 1930. There's about 55 buildings in this phase. When we go out now, we're doing a comprehensive sampling, so every fixture in the building. And we are prioritizing residence halls and then also buildings that have not had major renovations. So those are the ones within that 55 that we're doing first. So far, we have sampled 12 buildings comprehensively. We've received 3 building results back so far. Those were both residence halls, and all of those were non-detect. So 3 residence halls had comprehensive sampling, all non-detect. Phase 3 will be our next phase. Again, that's 1931 to 1990 buildings. There's approximately 200 buildings in this phase. And again, we'll look at residence halls first and then buildings that have not had major renovations. So I do want to talk a little bit about staffing and also really acknowledge the EHS staff that have been working on this. I have 3 EHS staff from our industrial hygiene group who have been the only people working on this for the last month. And they've done all the testing that has occurred. They've basically, in addition to their regular work, they've been out there early morning and staying late to do these samples and to make sure that we're doing this as quickly as possible. So I'd really like to acknowledge those staff members and their hard work. Additionally, we've been collaborating recently with Dr. Rebecca Fry from the School of Public Health. And she has been able to get some student volunteers to help us. These are environmental science focused students, and we've trained them and they've just gotten started with their testing. So they've done 2 buildings so far, but will be helping us with additional buildings. Additionally, as Daryl mentioned, we are, using a lot of different units to get a hold of this issue. So the university is also exploring other avenues for staffing in order to scale this up, because as you've seen, phase 2 has 55 buildings, phase 3 has 200 buildings. That's a lot of buildings, and that's a lot of water, drinking water fixtures that have to be tested. And then lastly, I just want to talk about notifications and transparency and also where people can receive updates. So from the beginning, when we determined that Wilson Library did have an issue, we immediately notified the building occupants. That detectable lead was found, and we continue that on as we've proceeded and found detectable lead. We're going to continue to do that both when we find detectable and also when we finish these comprehensive building surveys. And if it's not detectable, we're going to make sure that we're notifying the building occupants. I just sent out notifications this morning for those residence halls I mentioned previously. We are also updating the results on the EHS dedicated webpage, which the link is here. There's a new button on that webpage. It's green. You can go and look at the results for specific buildings and see the complete data. And then the other thing we're going to be doing is sharing updates via our Twitter account. And I do ask that this is actually a new account that we've created, but I do ask that people follow it and forward our tweets when we do have updates, because we do want to make sure that the campus community is updated when we have new results. And lastly, if there are general questions, you can call our main phone number. And then if there are health questions, we ask that you direct those to either, if you're an employee, to the University Employee Occupational Health Clinic, and then if you're a student, to Campus Health. And that is all my update. And I'm actually going to let Dr. Rebecca Fry speak a little bit to you as well.
Great. Hi, everyone. Greetings to my faculty council colleagues. I served on faculty council for several years, so thank you for your service. Just gonna, okay, hopefully my slides are sharing. And I also want to say thank you to Kathy Brennan and her team for everything that they've been doing. They moved quickly, as quickly as they could and efficiently. And it's a pleasure to work with her and her team. I just have a few slides, and then I'll be happy to take, I think we'll all be happy to take some questions. A little bit about me. I'm associate chair in the Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering, and I wear several hats in leadership roles, running the Environmental Health Solutions Institute, the Superfund Research Program, and serve as associate director in the Center for Environmental Health and Susceptibility. And my research has focused on the health effects associated with toxic metals exposure and identifying biological mechanisms that link that. And I was asked to serve in a scientific advisory role, and I offered to also help to see if we could bring in student volunteers so that we could, at least for this early phase, really ramp up and begin large-scale testing. So just a few things that you're probably aware of as it relates to lead. There's no safe level of lead. Lead is a toxic metal. It serves no useful purpose in the human body. There are differences in the harms of lead exposure in children and adults. This is dependent on timing of exposure. So obviously age makes a difference, the dose or the concentration, and the duration. So how long that exposure is happening. So risk is very individualized. There are several resources to turn to for more information. And as Kathy mentioned, the school is providing blood testing to anyone who has worked in or lives in the affected buildings. Probably the best known outcome associated with lead exposure in children is the brain damage that can happen. But lead exposure can also cause damage to other systems in the body. In addition to the neurological effects, can cause cardiovascular, GI effects, and hematological system effects. Again, young children and developing fetuses are the most susceptible to the exposure because their cells are still developing and because they can have higher concentration exposure. So obviously age is very important as we're thinking about this. To put the CDC uses a blood lead reference value of 3.5. That used to be 5, but was lowered last year. And for adults, that level is 5 micrograms per deciliter. So if someone has a blood test, that's what they're looking for. And as Kathy mentioned, the university has made health testing available for faculty, staff, and students who study, work, or live in the buildings, regardless of their risk categories. In terms of resources, EHS has prepared several forms of communication on their website, which you may have seen. They're listing all of the data that they're finding from all of the tested buildings, and also put together frequently asked question responses to help with the communication. Also, many other places that you can go to look for. I'll make sure that these slides are available to you. We have information on, we have a very strong environmental group at UNC. We have the Institute for the Environment. We have EHS, and then of course there would be CDC, the World Health Organization as well, which we can get information from. So far, we have about 10 students who were interested in being trained and volunteered, and they learned from Kathy's team, and they've successfully tested 2 buildings this past week, and we're about to ramp up and train an equal number, if not more, next week. And so I want to thank them. And we've also been consulting with other individuals with lots of expertise in the area of lead communication, such as Kathleen Gray at the Center for Public Engagement for Science, as well as our local Department of Health and Human Services. So I will stop there and think we can open this up for some questions from the faculty.
Thank you. Thank all of you. And yes, a hearty thank you to the staff that had to gear up so quickly, and just wonderful that our students are involved also in helping out on this. I do think that there's sort of a underlying question, which is, what I'm hearing from people are questions like, I've been filling up my teapot every morning in this, at this water fountain in this building for years. If that water fountain is found to have these fixtures in it, then what does that mean for my health? And I understand that people can go get tested and that sort of thing, but if you could just sort of give us, what's a dose and a duration that people would have to worry about so that we don't necessarily have to all run to get tested, maybe? Can you give us some guidance?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because, as I had mentioned, risk is so individualized. So some populations have different considerations than others. Obviously, pregnant women, breastfeeding women might need to exercise more caution. And so I do think we need to think about that individual risk. I think the other thing that we should keep in mind is that, in contrast to other areas where we may have lead exposure in public water systems and where individuals are drinking water continuously from their home, quite often, these will be infrequent and transient exposures. But if someone is concerned, I think they should. We do have the capacity, and the school is providing blood testing. And if they have further questions beyond that, I would suggest seeking consultation from a health provider.
Thank you. Do we have other questions in the room or on Zoom? Okay, I really appreciate all of you being with us today. I appreciate your hard work and for really giving us this very comprehensive update. If there's more to learn, please let us know and we'll ask you to come back. We will be following your Twitter feed. We'll put that on the Office of Faculty Governance website so that people will know to do that. And I'll follow you along and we'll try and get that word out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Next on our agenda is, I believe, Joy. Yep. Are you ready to talk about some potential changes to the faculty code coming out of the Committee on University Governance?
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to explain some things about the work that the Committee on University Government has been doing. And the role of the Committee on University Government involves reviewing the faculty code and faculty governance structures for relevance and responsiveness to current and anticipated environmental changes while maintaining stability and continuity of governance. A recent example was the code change brought forward by COOG to increase faculty voice and participation so that all general faculty votes occur via email rather than just a vote at faculty able to attend a faculty council meeting. So I recognize the report we submitted with this resolution was long. However, we needed to encapsulate 2 years of exploration and deliberation in one report and to be open and transparent regarding the breadth and depth of the work. Today's presentation will highlight the presentation up. Yeah, thank you. Today's presentation will highlight the key reasons for the COOG's exploration of governance structures, information sources and findings that folded into our discussions, the questions we ask ourselves and others as we considered any changes, and the rationale for the proposed code changes. COOG was engaged by the faculty to review the faculty officer positions with the goal of building in processes that could increase opportunities for faculty participation as a faculty officer and to increase access to the faculty officer roles. With this input and the recognition that higher education and our university environment needs and pressures have changed over the last 10 to 15 years, the committee began a 2-year process of study and evaluation of faculty governance structures and models that could answer the 2 issues raised: opportunity and access, while being watchful of the new model, that it still maintains stability and continuity. We began our work reviewing the current code and reviewed the pros and cons of our current model as it related to the goals of opportunity and access. One of our committee members during an early discussion stated it might be time to reevaluate and rethink qualifications for the offices and step back and see if what has been was contributing to bias as to what the person should look like in those offices. Perhaps a change in structure was one way to increase the number of interested candidates who are representative of the faculty. Our committee then embarked on benchmarking of 37 university faculty governance structures and had in-depth conversations with faculty leaders from 6 of those institutions. The topics for discussion with these leaders and with others and in our deliberations revolved around 3 areas. One was recruitment and sustainability, asking questions like, would the addition of a vice chair or chair-elect or immediate past chair with a shorter term for the chair make it easier to recruit and to retain leaders in these roles? Would a chair-elect, a chair-past chair model lead to better continuity of governance and decrease the startup needed for an incoming chair? The second area was impact of shared leadership. Would the addition of a vice chair or chair-elect and immediate past chair create a team structure, or might it create friction over varying priorities and goals? The third area of questioning was revolved around how does the leadership structure work in relation to the broader structure for faculty governance? What prior roles are important to have had to create experienced leaders ready for the chair position? And how is the broader structure organized? How do the roles of the secretary and a parliamentarian contribute to the success of faculty governance? As you can see in the report, it was clear that the majority had a structure similar to what is proposed in the resolution to amend the faculty code. We held interviews with leaders to ask about the feasibility of this model, and the interviewees shared how this structure was working in their institutions. A draft model of structure was then created based off of this data. To gain more perspectives and possible areas of additional discussion, the draft model was discussed with previous UNC leaders serving within the last 15 years and was shared with the Faculty Executive Committee and the Advisory Committee. Questions raised included whether there might be strained relationships between a chair-elect and chair, and is there need for a preparatory year? The committee does not want to underestimate the ability of our faculty to work together and be self-aware to understand their individual roles and the limits within those supportive roles. Based on our conversations with institutions who have this model, we believe the relationships can work in a collegial way. From our review and discussion with those who have this type of model and those who have been in the officer roles, we feel confident that concerns about personality do not outweigh the gains suggested by this proposed model. In fact, 5 previous chairs spanning the last 13 years, Coble, Boxell, Cairns, Parisi, and Kramer, were all in favor of the proposed changes. And 3 previous UNC faculty secretaries, Lensing, Farrell, and Stepanidis, were in favor of the proposed changes for secretary and could see benefits of changes to chair. The secretaries raised a question about recruiting every 2 years as opposed to every 3 years, but felt if the goal of broadening the candidate pool is realized, this question may be answered. This brings us to just a quick summary of the changes in the amendments. One would be to add a chair-elect with 1-year term, serves and also serves on the Faculty Executive Committee. The chair term would be reduced from 3 years to 2 years. And we would add a past chair designation of a 1-year term that serves on the advisory committee. And that the secretary term would be reduced from 5 years to 4 years with a possible renewal for 1 additional term. The rationale behind the proposed code revisions include these changes. The changes would ameliorate this raised issues relating to broadening the candidate pool. They will provide a preparatory year so more faculty can consider running for office, because the new structure will provide a year to shift teaching, research, or university and professional service commitments, as well as personal commitments. These changes are the predominant model seen at other institutions where it was felt the model supported recruitment of a more diverse background of candidates, helped with preparation for the chair role, and provided for continuity of governance. These changes are similar to the common succession leadership model that faculty have experienced in their professional organizations. The changes would allow the chair position to be for 2 years rather than 1, because of the complexity of this university and UNC system may require more than 1 year for a chair to address requests and issues raised by the faculty more fully. So in the chair-elect specifically rationale, it prepares for time and effort shift during the 2 years that will happen during the 2 years as chair. It allows time for department chairs and deans to work with the chair-elect to shift responsibilities during the 2 years as chair. It gives them time to review the faculty code and the roles and responsibility of the chair, to attend FEC meetings, to be aware of current and future faculty needs, concerns, and suggestions for continuity of discussions and work and issues. Provides an elected faculty member to substitute in meetings or events for the chair if requested by the chair, and improves continuity of leadership and university knowledge. The chair position would then require 2 years instead of 3 of being the central figure of faculty governance and of being available to respond to issues and crises that arise in the university community. It requires 2 years instead of 3 years of attending multiple monthly, weekly, and biweekly meetings. The past chair position provides insight gained from prior experience into how to organize and handle the roles and responsibilities of being chair, and would attend the advisory committee meetings to provide office and institution memory for ongoing communication with the chancellor, governing boards, diverse groups within and beyond the university, and again, contribute to continuity of leadership. For the secretary election and terms, it was to decrease the term by 1 year from 5 years to 4 years, with a renewal limit set to only a second consecutive term. The rationale there was the reduction in term may encourage more faculty members to place their names in nomination for secretary. The office requires a broad and deep understanding of the faculty code, the structure of university faculty governance, and operations of the faculty governance office. So shorter term did not seem reasonable for this office given the breadth of responsibilities. Term limits are proposed to address the need to have an opportunity for more faculty to be involved in faculty leadership positions. The amendments tie together the changes for both officers such that the elections for a new secretary would not coincide with the election of a new chair. This is a key reason why we are not asking for these changes to occur with the current election cycle, as well as not wanting to disrupt the work of the advisory committee in the current nominating process. So this kind of lays out for you how this would roll out if the amendments are approved this year by faculty council. So Chair A, which is the nominations for Chair A would be occurring right now, would still serve a 3-year term, as this would not go into effect until the next election. So the next election would happen in 24-25 of electing Chair B, who would come in as chair-elect and then serve 2 years as chair and then serve as in the past chair role. So as you can see, this lays out until you get to 28, 29, 29, 30, we don't see the full model where we would have a chair who has a past chair during their first year in office and has a chair-elect in their second year in office as chair. The current secretary term would end in June 2026. At that time, then the faculty council would either vote to renew or the current secretary if seeking renewal, or the election of a new secretary. So I'd like to stop there and invite 2 of our colleagues down from the committee, Lloyd Kramer and Andy Hessick, and we'll take questions on the report.
I'm Jan Hanek, Statistics and Operations Research. I'm sure this question probably has been asked, but it sounds like you are increasing the chairs from 3 to 4, even though it's not really set exactly that way. And will that make harder to get people because it's actually longer than shorter? And in connection with that, you mentioned that the chair-elect can substitute for the chair. Can the past chair substitute for the chair? Because there would be just 1 year that there's a chair-elect, but the other year there's a past chair.
Right. So yes, both of those questions we spent quite a bit of time on discussing of that. And some of the models we looked at did have a chair-elect, 1 year as chair and 1 year as past chair. But looking at the complexity of this university and the UNC system, we felt like the chair really needed to be in place 2 years to really conduct the business of what is currently happening at the university and forming those relationships and making that happen. So that's why we went with the 4-year plan. The past chair's role is pretty minimal unless the chair wants it to be. So one of the things we found in talking with lots of other universities and how this all works is it does vary by chair. Is some of the chairs greatly depend on their chair-elect and their past chair. Some of the chairs did not. So they said it really was up to the chair in the role at the time to decide how much they wanted to use the chair-elect and the past chair. So we're not seeing the past chair role as being terribly time consuming. It's more as being a reference for a chair as to what went on previously and how did they handle certain situations. So yeah, we were concerned about that as well. And your second part of your question was?
The second part was about, you mentioned that the chair-elect can substitute
Right.
for the chair. Can the past chair also substitute for the chair because they are not serving at the same time?
At the discretion of the chair, sure. So that would kind of happen now.
Would you like other members of the committee to say other questions or comments? So Andy and I are also on this committee, but we want to explain, I guess, why we support these changes. And I would just say very briefly, as someone who's observed this process at various stages of my career at UNC, that this issue of continuity, but also of change that Joy stressed is really important. Historians always talk about change and continuity. So one of the problems we have is that faculty governance is often seen as somewhat insular and the same people rotate through positions. And I can say twice when I was younger, and I don't hold myself up as diversity exactly, but I represented a younger faculty member. And I was asked to consider becoming chair. And I said, I don't think I know enough about it. I don't feel ready. I don't feel like, and I was probably at a different stage where I might have brought something new to the process. So I think this is a way to get more candidates from all demographic and ranks of the university, more engaged. And then on the issue, that's change. And on the issue of continuity, I felt that when I came into this role, there was no former chair right there. And actually, Mimi did a great job. She came in as chair, but you know, we talked a lot. And in fact, I got this idea from Mimi, to be quite honest. She said, can Lloyd be on some committee? And it was said, no, there is nothing in the code that, do you remember that?
Security blanket is what I mean.
So this is a security blanket system. And I don't think former chairs are likely to intervene, but they do have a lot of relationships and insight that could be useful just on the advisory committee. So that's why I support it.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so I obviously have not served in any of these positions. But the way I saw it was I listened to everyone who had served in these positions and then talked to the people at the other universities. And it seemed like there were a series of problems between the workload and the learning curve and the way elections would work between the chair and the secretary in terms of who would be an expert at the time, because there were some years where they were new at the same time. And a combination of all those issues, just sort of looking through the issues and listening to the kinds of objections that people had or the problems that they had and the ways that people at other universities handled it, this seemed to make really good sense, sort of a build up into the job and then a descent as past chair where you're helping out. And then just 2 years where it's sort of the heavier workload as chair. And that tied together with the 4-year term of secretary. So we're not going to have the problem of dual elections. It just sort of, these proposals met the kinds of issues that had been raised by lots and lots of people who'd formerly held the positions.
I'll read questions from the chat. The first is from Christina Birch. Did the chair and secretary receive any salary supplement for their service? And if so, how will this proposal change that? Would you like for me to answer it? This proposal does not address that. That is not addressed in the code. That's a matter of negotiation between the provost's office and the person who is serving as secretary or chair, and that's negotiated with them in their department. Follow up similar in a similar vein from Jan was, what about course buyouts? And that is also part of that negotiation that goes on. It's not addressed in the faculty code.
Other questions? Other questions in the room? Questions on Zoom, comments?
Can I just add one other point? If the, oh, there's a question.
Mark has a question. Yeah.
So as the proposal is written, the chair-elect sits on the faculty executive committee, so they hear the discussions, so everybody doesn't have to start over when they become chair. We know what happened the year before and what discussions have occurred and what issues are ongoing. So they serve as a non-voting ex officio member of FEC. The past chair serves as a non-voting ex officio member on the advisory committee.
Is it on? I'm not sure that that's on. Oh, Emma's bringing you another one. Emma's bringing one over.
I'll just use this. I'll just comment on the prior question, which the answer to which was this is not addressed by the resolution. But I would be happy in my office to consider a change that would allow both chairs to receive, commensurate with the size of the work, some course release or stipend for the work. I think that would be easy to accommodate.
We have more coming in on the chat that are still along that same line. So Audrey Pettifor, it sounds like that may have responded to your question, but I just wanted to also clarify that, yes, these things are negotiated now. There are course releases, there are salary supplements that are negotiated now for the secretary and for the chair. They would remain with the chair. Well, no, that's up to the provost. I'm not going to address that, but we don't put that in the faculty code. We don't. So that is a matter of those relationships.
Can I just, this is Audrey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I guess my point is just that, is this an unspoken rule that course buyout and compensation or salary supplement is available? I just want to make sure that somewhere in writing, it's clear that that is available from an equity perspective, so that, you know, it's not just up to whoever decides to negotiate that. So I just want to make sure that that is.
I mean, Audrey, I think by practice, it's always been negotiated, but it is negotiated by the dean of the department and the provost. That was my experience. It's not, I was not involved in active negotiation with the provost's office when I took this position. My dean was. And so I talked with him and then it went from there. But that's, I mean, those are important questions, but I want to reiterate, they're not, this is a change to the code and the code doesn't address them. So it is practice. You know, the provost could put out a memorandum about this or something, but that's not for our office necessarily to do.
Okay. I feel like all the DEI conversations we're having in our department, some of these things are the issues that people are raising, is that these sort of unspoken rules end up that people with more knowledge and in the end, you know how to negotiate and know how to work the system for themselves, and less experienced first gen people often don't. So I just want to make sure that we're addressing those.
Good point.
I'd just like to say one thing about that. there is, I believe, a customary amount. So this is not an unbounded conversation, but Audrey, you raise a really good point. And it was a point that came up in our first meeting of the Salary Equity Committee. The salary that you see is only one part of people's compensation. And I think we have to figure out, perhaps outside some of the more formal approaches to salary, an internal process for looking at equity, not just in these positions, but the same is true for almost any service position, that different people negotiate different things. And I think we're going to have to, at some point, be completely transparent about that process and about the outcomes. So I think this will be no different. And it will be the work of that committee, I think, to take some of that up. So we definitely have to look at that. So I take the point.
And in looking at the structure to try to broaden and allow to make this more possible for people to seek this office, that this all goes hand in hand. And you know, the work of our committee is structure and putting a structure in place that could allow things to happen. So giving more time for getting the shift in teaching and research and service and commitments and those sorts of things is the piece that happens structurally. But we did also briefly talk about that there would need to be some other structures put in place for mentoring people to get them into these roles. And also to bring up, I mean, there will be lots of committees involved, I think, to make this really be reality of being fair and equitable and representative of the faculty. One piece of it, as he says, with the Salary Equity Committee, we also felt like, and discussions with other institutions, is how does our university recognize service to the university and promotion and tenure decisions? And so I think there will be multiple committees that would find this work to be very useful to really broaden who we see in faculty governance.
There are a number of questions coming in through the chat. Would you, what I'd like to do is ask the people who are putting them forward if you'd consider unmuting yourself and stating your question, or I could read it. Sue Estroff, are you available to unmute and speak, or shall I read?
No, that's fine. I just don't think people are going to want me to unmute at this point. Yeah, I had some questions about this. One of which has to do with the on-ramp situation. And although it was a couple of decades ago when I was in Mimi's position, I don't think it's changed that much. It seemed to me that it might be more important to require prior faculty governance experience. So for anybody who wants to run for chair, and that the nominating committee should take that into consideration. And I was also interested in seeing some actual data. I think the report said that the other universities that were surveyed felt that this was a better system, but we don't have any actual numbers for how strong that sentiment was and who it was held by and for whom. And the last question was, it's not clear how these changes would increase the accessibility of faculty participation or faculty opportunity to be chair. So I told you you'd be sorry that I unmuted.
Okay, so tell me the first part of the question again. I want to make sure I answer all the questions.
Which question?
The first one.
The first one. Could we have some actual data?
The on-ramp, okay, the on-ramp piece. So we did talk about that and talk about that. And we did talk about that with some of the other institutions too, for why the chair-elect piece worked. And they said, you know, if you look at faculty governance structures, and some of them have obviously varying committee pieces to it, they said when you start requiring specific faculty governance experience, you have then taken your pool and limited your pool to who was able to do that to begin with. And that people could have other leadership experience that would also make them a good faculty leader and have the skills and knowledge of how to do that without having sat in those committees. So thank you for asking that, because I should have said something about that. Sue, is that was one of our considerations and one of the things we had in conversation. I think your second question was about having data as to how many places responded. I think we had 0 that thought they had a bad system. Is that correct? We had no one that thought they had a bad, that it didn't work. Everyone felt like the system they had was working.
But how many of the places said this?
Said what? That it worked?
how many of them that had this system, number one?
Yeah.
Compared to the total sample?
How many had this system?
Yeah.
Okay, I would have to count it up, but it was certainly, I would say most of them, well over 75%, but I would have to count them up to give you an exact number. It was by far and away the predominant model.
So I think for me, the more important question is, it's unclear how this particular change would make participation in faculty governance and leadership more accessible. I don't get it. So please help me.
Of course, it's impossible to predict exactly the outcome, but I think Joy mentioned the value of this system in professional organizations. I know in mine, American Historical Association, there's always a chair-elect who during a year kind of learns what it means to be the president. It's called the president. Then they serve as president, and then they're on the governing council for a year or two after that. And it creates, I feel like, a very successful system of transition. And at the moment, we do not have a very good system of transition. I mean, people are just dropped into this position. At UNC, we have chair training seminars now. We have all kinds of leadership programs, but we do not have a transition into and out of the position of chair. So I think this is a creative solution to an issue that we have not addressed.
Can I just add really quickly? I think it's the very fact of having a year of transition that makes it more attractive to people, because they don't have to suddenly jump into the deep end. They can sort of build up to it, and it's not such a daunting task in front of them.
Like I had some people that I would talk with them about, would you please run for, consider yourself to be nominated? And they said, well, I wish I would have thought about this because I just took on a different role, or I have a role finishing, but it's not going to be done for another year. You know, if I had that year and knew this was happening, I wouldn't take on new roles. I wouldn't do other things. So yeah, it was expressed from most everyone, having that year to shift and get your work life and your personal life in order before you're sitting in the chair opens up that more people are willing to do it. It's having the abrupt not knowing until, you know, right before you're going to be chair that you have to make those changes. And it's tough on the chairs and deans also expressed that they would like to have that year. If they're going to be having to find adjunct faculty to teach some of those faculty classes for a year or two, they would like to have some lead time to do that. So the deans and chairs, I think, would also find this. And that then folds in, right? If deans and chairs are supportive of people running for office, right, because they have this lead time, then you have, again, more faculty who might be willing because they're supported by their deans and chairs, because they're also not going to go through an abrupt change.
So we are running quite low on time. We do have one more question in the chat that we know of, and we have to make a decision about how you'd like to proceed at this point.
I think we're short on time, that if it's amenable, I would like to remove the resolution discussion from this meeting and move it to the next meeting, because I don't think people should be rushed about this. And if there's still questions.
Without objection, we can take the vote on the resolution off of the agenda for this month and move it to next month.
Okay. I'm going to read Eric's question.
Yeah. So while we have you, we do have one more question in the chat. This is from Eric Muller, who says he cannot unmute himself, so I'll read it. Would the panel please address the concern that the change will notably decrease the power and influence of the chair by shortening their term and placing others, in a sense, alongside them?
This is a great question, Eric, and some of what we discussed with the other institutions for how this had all worked. And actually, we didn't get anyone who felt like it did any damage having a chair-elect or a past chair. But again, some people, have expressed to us, you can't legislate personalities and you can't legislate how well people will play together and work together. But as my colleague said, we see this system as being valuable and broadening and deepening, really being more representative of all of our faculty from all ranges, from younger faculty to older faculty to faculty have very complex lives. Being able to participate is a gain. And the risk would be exactly what you're saying, Eric. Would there be ever an issue of where someone might not feel they have the power as chair because of who's in the chair-elect or the past chair position? But as I said, none of the schools we talked to had seen that as being a major issue. Does that mean it didn't happen with every chair?
Just a very brief comment on that. At the current system, the chair is elected, I think, in April. So just to take Mimi and me as an example, which is the one I know best, there was in effect a chair-elect for 2.5 months, and we collaborated. But if I may say so, I never felt that Mimi was going to seize. We were collaborating, but I didn't feel it undermined my ability to speak on behalf of the faculty during that time. And this is just expanding it from April back to, the previous July. But I don't think it will undermine the authority of the chair during that period. That's my own perspective.
It's a great question, Eric. The committee spent some time on that and certainly discussed it with our institutions.
Okay. We probably need to draw this to a close for today. Thank you for this, and thanks for all the work on your report. And Jan, we want to get a quick update from Faculty Assembly. We want people to first know what the Faculty Assembly is. Not everyone does. So Jan is the head of our delegation to the Faculty Assembly, and I'm going to let him take over.
Hello, I'll be quick. Can you do? So the Faculty Assembly is something like this, the Faculty Council for the university system. So it's comprised of delegates from all the institutions in the faculty, in the University of North Carolina system. So you can first move. I'll can move at least to the next slide. There's maybe not. So the next slide will show you the people who are on the assembly delegation from our university. There are only 5 people from the whole university that are on the assembly, and it's quite important for all of you to consider running, because it's good to have representation of all the various facets of this university. Now, there's a slight difference from usual faculty council, because the delegates are the people who win the election, and the alternates, as you know, are the people who lose the election. But on this particular committee, the alternates still serve. There are 2 alternates that are allowed to come to the meetings and even ask questions. Then I wanted to show, if you can go on to the next slide. You probably can't see, but the point of this slide is to say that the university system is very, very diverse. There are universities like ours, which is a very large research one university, NC State is another. And there are other universities that are somewhere in the middle, and there are some very small universities that are predominantly undergraduate institutions. There's even a high school in the system. So it's very diverse, and it sometimes feels very difficult to represent our university because the needs are so different between all of these various institutions. So if you can move on. So we have a new assembly chair. Just the system has the chair-elect and current chair system that we are trying to institute here. But it's kind of interesting because the chair-elect quit the system, so then we had to get immediately a new chair, which was really interesting. Move on to the next slide. The point of the assembly is to represent faculty voice. As I said, we have very different experiences. I realize how lucky we are here in the council that provost and chancellor come. It's a huge thing. We should be very thankful. We are very thankful. Because at the assembly, the leadership rarely comes. I've seen President Hans once or twice. And so in my mind, the biggest thing we can do through these meetings is that the leaders actually hear faculty voice. And I'm very thankful that that provost and chancellor come to our meeting, but there it's not as common. But sometimes board of governors members to come to this. Sometimes we had even members of the legislature come. So you get to chance to address people at various levels. Please move on. Because we are running out of time, I just want to hit on sort of the big issues that are in front of us. The big one for the system is declining enrollments. We and NC State don't have the problem. Everybody else does. And people are very worried about it because the demographic changes in North Carolina seem like there'll be fewer and fewer potential students. And so that's one big issue that people have discussed. New system budgeting model, also very important. I'll have one slide about it on the next page, but I'll keep going on the list. System strategic plan refresh, return on investment study. People worry about these because it's not clear how these things impact us and what is being measured and what is being valued. And faculty welfare is repeated. You get to feel like we actually, with all our problems, we are doing pretty well here, but so far. So let's move on. This is kind of worrying because it wasn't clear to many people what the new funding system is. Apparently, we were shared this slide. I don't know what that means. Maybe Burroughs knows more what that means, but I have I've personally asked some of the board of governors members the question, what is the goal? What are they trying to achieve by the new model? And several of them mentioned that they are trying to increase funding for smaller campuses. I don't know whether it's true, but that's what they told me. So next slide.
Jan, I just want to interrupt you for a moment and just say that we are, I believe in November, Nate Knuffman will be with us. And so he'll be, December, I'm sorry. Thank you, Helene. That, and we'll kind of talk more about this budget model at that moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really important, that'll affect all of us. So that's important. And finally, two big projects. Project Kitty Hawk seems to attract a lot of attention at the assembly. I don't know if you heard about it, but the University of North Carolina system and the assembly put almost 100 million in state funding that came from COVID funds. And they put that into starting an online course delivery system. It's undergraduate focused. And that's all I know about it.
We had Todd Nicolette come and talk to us last spring, and our campus is not really affected by Kitty Hawk because we have resources for online options already, is sort of my takeaway from that.
The takeaway was you don't have to use it, but they will do it. And if you find it useful, you can use it. But yeah, I don't know. I'll just say it's more complex than that. Required. Not required, but strongly encouraged. And there is a common course numbering. Several of my colleagues were surprised about this, but the system has a list of lower level undergraduate courses, how they link between various campuses. I personally was a little bit concerned about it because I was afraid that they would force us to have the same number everywhere, but I don't think that's happening. So that's all I had about what's happening at Faculty Assembly.
Thank you. There's also all of the chairs from the various campuses also meet. And this is one of the things that they have asked, is that we make sure that there are regular updates from the assembly to our council. And so I'm very appreciative to Jan for doing that. I think that concludes our agenda. Okay. And it's my birthday, so we're adjourning. Okay. And anyway, I thank you all for being here, and I'll look forward to seeing you next month. Write, call, whatever you need to do. I'm available.
Back in Carr Hall next time.
Back in Carr Hall. Okay, good. Thank you to those of you on Zoom.
birthday messages in the chat.
Person who might have a question.
I look like it's coming from me, but that's okay. Please take.